When you were a child, did you ever say to yourself, "I will never act like my mom," or "I'm definitely not going to be like my dad"? As kids, we're convinced we'll be different, more patient, more understanding, more conscious in the way we react. But then life happens, and one day something strange occurs. You hear your own voice in the middle of a conversation, and suddenly realize you're speaking exactly like your mom. The same words, the same tone, the same emotion. Or you react to a situation the same way your dad used to. Sometimes it's so unexpected that a thought flashes in your mind. Wait, that didn't even feel like me. So why does this happen? Why is it that even when we promise ourselves we'll be different, in certain moments we end up repeating the very reactions we once said we'd never have? Someone says something sharp, and you respond exactly the way your mother used to. A conflict appears, and you shut down or defend yourself just like your father did, and later you catch yourself thinking, "Why did I react like that again?" The truth is, it's not random. From childhood, our brains are constantly recording the behavior of the people around us, how they deal with stress, how they express love, how they handle conflict, how they respond to life. Over time, those patterns become internal programs. But here's the important part. The moment you notice it, the moment you realize, this reaction isn't really me, it's an old pattern, you suddenly gain something powerful: choice. The choice not to repeat the past, but to create your own response. When I was growing up, my mom wasn't the worst example in my life, but she also wasn't the best one. There were many reactions and behaviors in her that I struggled with for a long time. Certain ways she spoke, the pressure she put on me, the subtle manipulation in conversations. It all created a feeling inside me that something just wasn't right. My separation from my mom was not easy. In fact, it was one of the most painful processes in my life. Around the age of 16, I started to rebel. I pushed back against her behavior, against the control, against the emotional pressure I felt from her. At that time, I didn't fully understand what was happening. All I knew was that something inside me was fighting for the right to be myself. When I got married, the situation became even more intense, and I started doing something that might sound unusual to many people. About every 6 months, I would take a break from communicating with my mom. Sometimes that break lasted a year, sometimes even longer. And there was a reason for that. At that point in my life, I didn't yet have the awareness to see where I was reacting like her. I couldn't recognize when I was making decisions from the same patterns I had grown up around. All I knew was how I felt. Every time I spoke with my mom, it felt like something inside me started collapsing. Her pressure, her expectations, her view of life. It was so different from the path I was trying to create for myself that after every conversation, I felt like my inner world was being shaken, almost as if my life was being quietly pulled back into a reality I had been trying to move away from. So the only way I knew how to protect myself at the time was to step away, to close that door for a while. But over time, I started noticing something very important. Every time I created distance, things inside me became quieter, clearer. My thoughts felt more like my own again. My decisions felt calmer. My life started moving in the direction that I actually wanted. But then one day I noticed something that completely changed my perspective. In certain moments, I would hear a familiar tone in my own voice. Sometimes it was a phrase, sometimes a reaction, sometimes the way I defended myself in an argument. And suddenly I would think, wait, that didn't really feel like me. It sounded exactly like my mom. That was the moment a deeper realization started to form. The problem wasn't only what was happening between my mom and me. Some of those patterns were already living inside of me, and that realization was powerful. Because before that, it seemed like the issue was outside of me, in the relationship, in the conflict, in her behavior. But our minds work in a much deeper way. As children, we don't just listen to our parents, we absorb them. We absorb how they respond to stress, how they express love, how they deal with conflict, how they react when they feel hurt, threatened, or powerless. Over time, these patterns become internal programs. And when strong emotions appear in our lives, those old programs are often the first ones that activate. Sometimes so automatically that we don't even realize we are reacting from a script that was written years ago, not from our conscious choice, but from something we simply inherited. And that's when I understood something very important. Real separation from our parents isn't just about physical distance. It's the moment when we start to notice which reactions are truly ours and which ones we unknowingly carried from the past. And that awareness is where real inner work begins. Not fighting our parents, but recognizing the parental programs that still live within us. And once we see them, we finally have the power to choose something different. Now let's look at 2 more real-life examples where parental programs show up automatically, especially when you spend a lot of time around your mom or dad. Example 1. Panic or anxiety in conflict. Imagine this. Someone speaks sharply to you. You start to worry, get angry, feel anxious. And suddenly you realize your reaction is exactly the same as your parents in a similar situation. For example, your mom used to raise her voice and escalate arguments, and now you respond the same way, even though the situation is completely different. Your body and mind automatically trigger that old program, and you end up reacting from someone else's patterns instead of your own. Example 2. Fear of saying no. Or think about this. Someone asks you for help, even though you already have your own tasks. Immediately, a voice pops into your head. You have to help, or you're being selfish. This is exactly what your mom or dad used to say when they put their expectations above yours. And here's the thing. You don't even notice this voice as separate from yourself. It activates automatically, and you end up saying yes, even when you want to say no. It's not a weakness. It's an old program running on autopilot, living inside you. And here's the key. Every time you notice that your reaction isn't really yours, it's someone else's, you get a choice. You can pause. You can step out of autopilot. You can consciously choose your own reaction instead of repeating old patterns. True freedom begins when you stop unconsciously replaying someone else's scripts and start creating your own responses. Have you ever wondered why we so often repeat our parents' behavior, even as adults? Why we speak the same words, react the same way to stress, feel the same emotions as they did? Here's the truth. When we grow up, our brains don't distinguish ours from theirs. It simply records the patterns we see and hear every day. How mom handles stress, how dad expresses anger, how they love or criticize. All of it becomes part of our internal program. And these programs aren't just thoughts. They're energetic patterns, deeply embedded in our body and subconscious. When an emotion is triggered, the body automatically reproduces the old reaction, and the mind justifies it logically. This is how I feel, so it must be right. But in reality, it's not truly you. It's a program handed down from your parents. Here's something important. These programs run on autopilot. Even when we think we're fully in control, we can try to fight the consequences, manage the behavior, deal with conflicts. But if the program is still inside, it will keep triggering. Old reactions repeat. Irritation, anxiety, guilt, fear of saying no, the urge to please everyone. Awareness of these parental programs is the first step to freedom. When you notice that you're reacting like your mom or dad, you get a choice. Keep walking their path or create your own response. And here's the key. Programs aren't erased by fighting them. They need to be rewritten. Rewritten through awareness, through pausing between the trigger and your response, through observing yourself, and consciously choosing a new frequency. Your own thoughts, emotions, and actions. Only when you realize that many of your reactions are old parental patterns do you start to exit autopilot. You no longer repeat someone else's fears, anxiety, or anger. You begin to act from your own inner position, creating your life on your own terms. And this is what transforms you from simply repeating someone else's program into a creator of your own reality. When you realize that your reaction is actually someone else's program, the real work begins. Here are the key steps. Step 1. Pause. Between the trigger and your reaction. Whenever you feel an old reaction, anger, fear, anxiety, guilt, insert a pause. Don't act automatically. Just stop for 2-3 seconds and create a space between the trigger and your response. In this moment, you are not the program. You are the observer, and you have a choice. Step 2. Observation and awareness. Don't fight the emotion and don't try to change it immediately. Simply watch. There's anxiety in me right now, but I am not the anxiety. Anger is rising, but I am not the anger. You learn to separate yourself from the inherited program and see it from the outside. Step 3. Conscious choice of a new reaction. From this observer state, you choose how to respond. Calm instead of panic. Confidence instead of fear. Clarity instead of habitual worry. You consciously set a new frequency for your reaction. Step 4. Subconscious rewriting. Sit in silence and recall a situation where the old program was triggered. Locate the sensation in your body. Breathe deeply into that spot, imagining that your inhale fills it with light and your exhale releases the tension. With each practice, the old program weakens and the new reaction becomes stronger. Step 5. Following your true desires. Before practicing, it's important to understand why you want this specific action or result. Your true desires are signals from your future self, a version of you that already exists as a real possibility. By following these signals, you start creating life on your own terms rather than replaying inherited parental scripts. So, let's wrap this up. Most of our habits, reactions, and thoughts, they aren't truly ours. They're programs inherited from our parents, society, past traumas, and old experiences. They run on autopilot until we become aware of them. Here's the good news. You can rewrite these programs. You can insert pauses, observe yourself, consciously choose your reactions, reprogram your subconscious, and follow your true desires. You can become the one who creates life on your own terms, instead of repeating someone else's script. Now, here's the question I want you to answer. Which reaction in your life is still not really yours, inherited from your parents? Drop it in the comments. Share what you notice about yourself when these old programs activate. And more importantly, how would you truly like to respond from your own choice? Your awareness is your first step to freedom. Every time you choose your response, you change not only yourself, but your entire reality. Today, you have the chance to take that first step. Pause. Observe. Choose. And let us know in the comments what you're creating.